Ecclesiastes chapter 8 this morning. If you go ahead and turn your Bibles there. Before we get into the text, I want to pose a question. It's a real question. I know we don't normally do this in the first hour, but as we study through the first 7 chapters of Ecclesiastes, what are the major themes? And they kind of recur often in this book. We're going to see that they recur as we continue our study to the end of the book. What are the ones that pop up? Let me just call them out. Fear God. Work and pleasure. That's a lot of our lives as you think about it. We spend a lot of time working, and we want to have pleasure, and those are things that God gives in both cases. And Ecclesiastes deals with both those. Vanity. Vanity, vanity, come all is vanity. That opens the book and closes it, and we see him repeating that a number of times through the book. Very prominent theme.
What does it profit a man?
What does it profit a man in all his activity he does under the sun? That is the question that's posed at the very beginning. He re-asked that question a number of times during the book. That's what he's trying to come up with the answer to. And he does. We still haven't gotten the ultimate answer to that question, but he's leading us to that answer that he'll give at the very end of the book. So that's good. Let me just flash up a lot of the ones that you said. All is vanity. It maybe doesn't say it explicitly like this, but he has his hand in the book of Genesis, and he's looking at the effects of the fall that occurred back in Genesis 3. That's what he's looking at, and that's what he's examining from a number of different angles, and that's why he makes this statement, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. It's the same thing that Paul is talking about in Romans 8 when he talks about the creation being subjected to futility. Now, this is one that we didn't kind of cut you off, so you might have come up with this later, but the fact that man's wisdom is limited. He doesn't know the future. He doesn't know the best time to act always. Now, certainly you can get wisdom, you can talk to people that have wisdom, and you can make a stab at the best time to act. And sometimes it'll come out with a good outcome. But just think about it this way. If you knew something was going to happen down the road, and you knew it with the same certainty of the sun coming up tomorrow, what a difference that would make in your life as you made decisions. But we don't know that. God is the one that knows that. And that's why we trust him. Fear God, as Bev said, and particularly in light of coming judgment. That's going to become more clear as we get to the end of the book. We don't always think about judgment as believers. God will judge us as well. We'll stand before the bema seat of Christ, and knowing that motivates us to live holy lives. Now, it's not a fear that we're not going to be saved. It's not a fear of condemnation for our sins. God has already taken care of that. But it does, having become a believer, make a difference for us to think about the fact that God's going to judge the way that we conduct ourselves after being a believer. Enjoy life despite the effects of the fall. 7 times. We're going to see another one of those today in chapter 8. Solomon exhorts us to enjoy life, to see it as a gift from God. Limitations of wisdom I touched on a little bit. It's interesting the way that Solomon treats this. He goes back and forth. On the one hand, he commends wisdom, and he talks about how much better it is than foolishness. And he certainly exhorts us to choose wisdom over foolishness. At the same time, he recognizes that we can seek for wisdom all that we want to, and there's still going to be things that we don't know. He recognizes that both the wise and the fool are going to die in the end. So then he's asking the question, in light of that, why be wise? It's a lot harder to be wise than it is to be foolish. And again, he's asking that question and looking at it from a really critical point of view to lead us to an ultimate conclusion. Again, ultimately we must trust God and his wisdom, for he knows and controls everything. That's what we read this morning in Job 28 was that man has incredible wisdom in many areas. And to me, it's always interesting to look at man through the centuries, to look at how technology has developed. even to see how technology was a big part of man's civilization way back. Man was able to do some incredible things very early in his existence, only because God gave him that ability. It's part of his responsibility to rule over the creation. And yet, there's still a lot that man can't do, especially compared to what God does and knows. And that's something that Solomon's examining in the book of Ecclesiastes. All right. So those are the themes. We're going to see that they're going to continue. Virtually every one of those themes shows up in chapter 8. It's kind of interesting as we look at that section this morning. But let's review now what we covered last week, or last 2 weeks really, in chapter 7. We started at the very beginning of chapter 7. We saw that the end of a matter is better than the beginning. That makes sense to us. We don't know how something is going to work out at the very beginning, as much as we'd like for it to work out well. The end is better. And in the same way, the end of life is better than the beginning, in the sense of, one, you earn a reputation over time. When a little one is born, there's great joy at the birth of a new baby and the birth of a new life. But you don't know how that life is going to play out over time the way you do at the end of life. And then Solomon goes on to say from that it's better to be in a house of mourning than it is to be in a house of feasting. Because when you're in a house of mourning, you tend to reflect on the issues that are more serious. The fact that you too are going to die one day, and you tend to examine your own life in light of that. We saw in verses 7 through 10 that we have to guard our hearts against foils to wisdom. The foils that we looked at were things like oppression, rivalry, haughtiness of spirit or pride, anger, harmful reminiscing. These are things that can work against the good outcomes of fearing the Lord and practicing wisdom. And again, Solomon's just trying to help us. He's not only trying to help us understand the importance of fearing the Lord, but he's also giving us warnings of things that can work against that fear as we live our lives out under the sun. And then we saw a conclusion at the end of the section 1 through 14, where Solomon says, yes, on the one hand, wisdom is indispensable. We have to have it if we're going to succeed in this life. I mean succeed according to God's standard, not according to the world's. But on the other hand, life is ultimately in the hand of God. That is ultimate wisdom. Fear of the Lord is not only the beginning of wisdom, it's the end of wisdom. It's recognizing that we're not going to know everything that we'd like to know. That there's going to be times when we have questions that are not going to be answered in this life. Job never got an answer to why he went through what he did, but he did get an answer from God, and that was basically, trust me. I've made the world. I know what I'm doing. We're going to look at that more at the end of our study this morning. The second half of chapter 7 gave us 3 main points. One is to assess the wisdom of righteousness. Very unusual verses in this section. Talked about don't be overly righteous. We explained how we believe the best understanding of that is don't think that you're better than everybody else, and that you're meeting the righteous standard in a way that nobody else is. Watch out for self-righteousness. He's not saying, he comes back and says don't be overly wicked. He's not saying be a little bit wicked, but don't be overly wicked. No, he's saying in both cases, don't be self-righteous on the one hand, don't be wicked on the other. You have to acknowledge your need for wisdom. I think that's easy enough for us to do. Think about what it would be like if we lived in this world without revelation from God. A lot of people out there that do that, they don't open their Bibles, and these same things happen to them, and they look at it from a completely different perspective than somebody who does know the Lord and does have access to His Word. We have to understand that we need wisdom, and yet at the same time, it's hard to get. I think we're encouraged to seek after wisdom the way we are in Job 28, the way we are in the book of Proverbs, because it takes effort. It's there, but God wants us to dig it out more than what we would do for digging out treasure. And then finally recognize that the greatest challenge to wisdom is our own hearts as a result of the fall. We're our worst enemy in the sense that we still have that indwelling sin. We still have something in us that is bent towards unrighteousness. Now, God's working on that for us that trust in Christ. He's sanctifying us in the truth and over time, and we should see fruit in our lives and growth. But we won't be completely free of this opposition to righteousness until we're with the Lord and until we get glorified bodies. Well, that brings us to chapter 8, which we've titled The Incomprehensibility of God's Activity. A lot of Ecclesiastes deals with man's activity under the sun, but there's certain places, back in chapter 3, here in chapter 8, where Solomon is examining God's activity. In this chapter, we're going to divide it up into two main sections. The first half is the administration of an earthly king, much like Solomon himself, whom the wise man must serve. A wise man, and this can include both wise people that are part of the kingdom, just regular subjects of the kingdom, as well as a wise man that would advise the king. Solomon had those in his court. You can remember Nebuchadnezzar had wise men that were part of his cabinet, the way we would say today when leading our country. They were specialists in wisdom. And there were certain matters that the king would consult the wise man on to just get wisdom, to know how to act in a certain situation. So, in these first verses in chapter 8, we see that the administration of an earthly king can be understood. It's not so mysterious that you can't understand it, and not so mysterious that you can't get wisdom to know how to act in light of it. But the second half of chapter 8 deals with the administration of God as king, which is not as easy to understand. There's certain aspects of it that very much parallel the king of an earthly administration, a human administration, but there's parts of God's administration of the universe that we don't understand. Even the wisest of men can offer no counsel to God. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? God has ultimate wisdom. He doesn't need to ask anybody what to do in such a situation because he knows what he's going to do. Has known it for a long time. All right, let's look now first at a wise man understanding the king's administration. First, we have the big question in chapter 8, verse 1. Who is like the wise man? And who knows the interpretation of the matter? A man's wisdom illumines him and causes his stern face to beam. Now, we already talked about the fact that wisdom oftentimes takes a hit in the book of Ecclesiastes the way that it does not in any other book. Solomon looks at it very critically, and he looks at its shortcomings. But if you think about it, there's also a number of places in the book where he recognizes the great value of wisdom. Ecclesiastes 2:13, I saw that wisdom excels folly, as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head. That is, he can see and understand and act accordingly. But the fool walks in darkness. Then again, chapter 2, verse 26. For to a person who is good in God's sight, he has given wisdom. It's a good gift from God. And knowledge and joy. While to the sinner, he's given the task of gathering and collecting so that he may give it to the one who is good in God's sight. In chapter 7, verses 11 and 12. Wisdom along with an inheritance is good, an advantage to those who see the sun, who live under the sun. For wisdom is protection, just as money is protection. But the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. Talk about the fact that it's certainly better to have money than not to have it, particularly when you run into a crisis where you need resources to meet whatever challenge it is. Well, wisdom is even more valuable than money, because if you're living a life of wisdom, you at least have some idea of the best way to handle a certain situation or the best way to act in light of the challenge. Chapter 7, verse 19, wisdom strengthens a wise man more than 10 rulers who are in the city. And then chapter 10, verse 10, we've not gotten to this one yet. It's a really good encapsulation of the value of wisdom. If the axe is dull and he, a man, does not sharpen his edge, then he must exert more strength. Wisdom has the advantage of giving success. It's a classic example. If you're going to go out and cut some trees down, and you're going to use an axe to do it or a chainsaw, you've got to exert more effort if it's not sharp. Well, what wisdom does is say, I know this, I'm going to sharpen my axe first. And you get a better outcome when you do that. Well, that's what wisdom does. And this verse, in the first verse of chapter 8, falls into this group of a very positive statement about the edge or the advantage that wisdom provides. When he says, who is like the wise man, who knows the interpretation of the matter, he's speaking to the incomparability of wisdom. There's nothing like it. Now, this would be especially exemplified in a professional wise man, a sage, the man whom kings depended upon as they led their kingdoms, they made decisions, and particularly when they were faced with a difficult task. Now, we can think of a couple of biblical characters that fit this description, maybe more, but the ones that come to mind to me are Joseph and Daniel. Think about the similarity between these two men. Both came from being slaves to being advisors in the king's court, and then to ultimately being rulers over a portion of the kingdom. And the reason that they were able to do that was through wisdom. Not just in the interpretation of dreams, although that was a significant part of it for both of these men, but also just in the way that they carried out their responsibilities. So the interpretation of the matter in this verse, in chapter 8, verse 1, is not just the interpretation in the sense of a dream, or the way that we normally think about interpretation in the sense of, for example, a passage of Scripture. But rather it's how to do something in order to obtain a good outcome. That's what wisdom is all about. That's why Proverbs is such a practical book for us. It deals with issues that we deal with every day. It deals with them as to how to get the best outcome. From everything from how you greet your neighbor in the morning when you first get up, to whether or not the way that you do your work will cause you to stand before kings or before obscure men. Wisdom looks at what's to be accomplished, figures out the best way to get there, and seeks to get there with the best possible outcome. That's why Jesus, or I should say, that getting the best outcome is really what wisdom is all about. And that's why Jesus said what he said. He says, wisdom is vindicated by her children, by the results that you get from whatever you're trying to do. And that's what Solomon means when he says, a wise man's face illumines him and causes his stern face to beam. He's able to do that because of the good outcomes that he gets. He puts wisdom into practice. All right, that's the big question. Let's look now at the good advice in verses 2 through 5. The first advice is to follow the king's orders. Verse 2 says, keep the command of the king because of the oath before God. The oath being here a pledge of loyalty to the king. And the first part of verse 3 goes on to say, do not be in a hurry to leave him. Do not join in the evil matter. Think about it this way. If you're standing before the king and you're looking at your watch and you're kind of in a hurry to get your business done here and get out of there, well, that demonstrates a lack of respect. It makes it look like your business is more important than the king's. More seriously, he's warning us not to be part of some kind of movement against the king, some kind of rebellion. Now, there's been times where a rebellion against somebody in authority has worked. But boy, if it doesn't work, there's serious consequences. And this is just something that Solomon's warning us here not to be in a hurry to do. Related to that is an understanding, a proper understanding of the king's authority. In verse 4, well, the last part of 3 and then 4. For he, the king, will do whatever he pleases. Since the word of the king is authoritative, who will say to him, what are you doing? Now, I think this is something hard for us to fully appreciate because we live in a representative democracy, or we would also call a republic. We live in a different system of government than Solomon did in his day, and much of biblical history is under. We live in a system that has checks and balances built into it. And the reason that the very reason for that system is to prevent one man from having the kind of authority that the kings had in Solomon's day. But this kind of authority was very much the rule in his day. Subjects did not question what the king did. And this is reflected well in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 9. The context in which it's speaking about God here doesn't use the word king, but he is the ultimate authority. Isaiah 45:9 says, "Woe to the one who quarrels with his maker, an earthenware vessel among the vessels of earth. Will the clay say to the potter, what are you doing?" That's a very strong illustration. We think if we're making a pot as a human being, that pottery, that clay doesn't speak back to us. It doesn't have any choice in the matter. Well, it's a similar kind of relationship between God and man. Because the king has such authority, because there was no one higher than the king to whom you could make an appeal, the wise thing to do was to remain both loyal and subject to the king. And it's interesting that the book of Proverbs speaks about this on a number of occasions. Proverbs 24:21, "My son, fear the Lord and the king. Do not associate with those who are given to change." And again, I think given to change in the sense of rebelling against the king and trying to overcome and create a new system. Proverbs 25:6, "Do not claim honor in the presence of the king, and do not stand in the place of great men." It's not your place to do that. The king himself is the great one. You recognize that. You recognize the position he's in, the authority that he possesses, and you don't try to one-up that. Proverbs 14:35, "The king's favor is toward a servant who acts wisely." There's the value of wisdom again. "But his anger is toward him who acts shamefully." And in Proverbs 16:14, "The wrath of the king is as messengers of death, but a wise man will appease that wrath." Kings, because they had absolute authority, could be very whimsical in their decisions. Think about the story of Esther and the fact that she was willing to go into the king. She's taking a chance that she did that if she went without invitation. That gives you kind of an idea of the authority that a king had. You had to approach that very carefully. Now, I mentioned Daniel earlier as an example of someone who served as a counselor to the king and who exemplified these qualities of being loyal and being subject even to rank pagan kings, no matter if the king be the Lord or not. You might ask, well, aren't there times when he went against the wishes of the king? And that's true, he did. He drew lines where the earthly king's law clearly went against God's law. But even when Daniel found himself in that kind of situation, he still showed great loyalty and respect to the king. He still remained subject to the consequences of his disobedience. Conversely, he didn't lead a large-scale revolt. He didn't try to get out of the punishment that was coming his way. But of course, the same teaching is found in the New Testament for us. Romans 13 says that let every person be in subjection to the governing authority, whether it's a king or a president or a local authority. For there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, he who resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God. They who oppose will receive condemnation upon themselves. Paul says essentially the same thing in Titus 3:1. Remind him to be subject to rulers, to authorities, to be obedient, to be ready for every good deed. Understanding the king's authority leads to a proper attitude toward the king, and that in turn is part of embracing the wise approach. This is in verses 5 through 7. He who keeps a loyal command experiences no trouble. Now again, I have to qualify that a little bit. It sounds like an absolute statement. But there's times, and we see it in Scripture, where somebody had to obey the law of God rather than the law of men. He went against the king. And there are consequences for that. But in general, it's much better to submit and obey than it is to resist and revolt. He who keeps loyal command experiences no trouble, for a wise heart knows the proper time and procedure. For there is a proper time and procedure for every, the NAS has delight here. The word can also be translated matter. And I think that makes more sense in this context. There's a proper time and procedure for every matter when a man's trouble is heavy upon him or when he's in a difficult situation. And this is the same thing that I was describing earlier. If you want a successful outcome, first you have to know the right procedure to get there. Then you have to execute the right steps in the right order. And then you know the right time for each step. Now that procedure applies to something as mundane as taking care of your grass to pursuing an academic degree. Those steps are the same. Now we're going to see the book Daniel provides an excellent example of this in at least two instances. When Daniel and his friends were confronted with eating food from Nebuchadnezzar's table, food that had very likely been offered to idols, they didn't stage a demonstration and then circulate a petition amongst the other exiles and say, let's sign this and present it to the king that we can't do this. Instead, Daniel quietly made an appeal to the immediate supervisor over him, an appeal that was granted because of the way that it was made. And what was the outcome? Daniel and his three friends, at the end of the 10-day test, appeared healthier than all the other men who had been eating from the king's table. And ultimately, they were granted positions in the king's personal service. Later, when Daniel's three friends were faced with either when Daniel's two friends, Daniel wasn't part of this, when they were presented with either bowing down to the king's statue or enduring the flames of the fiery furnace, they drew the line at the right place. They refused to bow down, while at the same time remaining respectful to the king. Listen to this part of the story in Daniel 3:16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we're not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you've set up. They're recognizing his authority as king. They're not resisting the punishment that's coming their way because of their refusal to bow down. And what is the outcome? God miraculously delivered the three men from death, even though they were thrown into the furnace of fire. But it goes even further than that. There was a significant impact on both the king and his kingdom. Verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants and who put their trust in him, violating the king's command. The king recognized that, and yielded up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any god except their own God. So that was the impact that it had on the king himself. But then he sends out a decree throughout his kingdom. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses reduced to a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver this way. Then the king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to prosper in the province of Babylon. So at this point, you might look at these examples and say, well, all I have to do is be subject to those that God has placed in authority over me. And even when I find that I have to disobey one of their commands, in the end, God will deliver me and everything will be prosperous. Well, not necessarily. It doesn't always work out that way. Solomon's already made that point on a couple of occasions. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when it's going to happen. Put another way, and Solomon said back in chapter 3, both knowledge of the future and timing of events are ultimately in the hand of God. Our responsibility is to trust him the way that the three friends did, no matter what he chooses to do. Now that provides us with a transition to the next section of chapter 8, and that is that even a wise man cannot fully understand God's administration of his kingdom. In the previous section, Solomon talks about the best way to act under an earthly king, and it was things that a wise man can understand. But he's using that as a background and a contrast to how we think and live under the administration of God as king. society to rule the kings, there are four things over which no man has authority. These are listed in verse 8. The wind, and Solomon's even made reference to this in the book of Ecclesiastes. It talks about shepherding the wind. We have absolutely no control over how the wind blows. We've had some storms recently. We've seen on the news tornadoes and hurricanes. I mean, we can try to defend ourselves against those by building stronger buildings and by getting down in the basement when we know they're coming, but we cannot stop them. Similarly, we don't know the day of our death. We can die very young in an accident. We can live 80, 90, 100 years sometimes, but we don't know when it's coming. Thirdly, he speaks about escape from serving in a time of war. You can't discharge yourself if you're a soldier. You don't have any control over that. And then finally, escape from retribution for evil. Now, he's going to go on later in this chapter, and certainly we know by experience that evil men get away with things. Evil men prosper, and they prosper for a long time. Sometimes they don't even get caught at all in this life. But ultimately, they will get caught. Man doesn't have authority over these four things, but God does. And that's the difference between his administration and his kingdom and man's. Now, verse 9, Solomon, he does this throughout the book. He just reminds us again of this investigation of all the deeds that man does in his life under the sun. He says in verse 9, all this I've seen, I apply my mind to every deed that has been done under the sun, wherein a man has exercised authority over another man to his hurt. Now, he's kind of honing in that last part of oppression, something else that he's talked about earlier in the book. But now he turns to examine the truth that God's retribution principle is driven by God's own wisdom. This is in verses 10 through 17. And these truths are important because if you don't take these things into account, you're going to end up questioning God. I'm not talking about questioning whether or not he exists, or questioning even whether or not he's good, but questioning at times of why does God allow this? Why is he doing this? It won't make sense to us. Let's look first at God's retribution principle being driven by his wisdom, verses 10 through 14. Verse 10, evil men don't always get their due. Verse 10 says, so then I've seen the wicked buried, those who used to go in and out from the holy place, and they're soon forgotten in the city where they did thus. This too is futility. Now he's talking about being buried here, and we've talked about this before as well. The fact that a proper burial at the end of life is extremely important to the people in Solomon's day. And he's saying even the wicked get this. They can get decent burials at the end of their lives. Their wickedness is not always recognized for what it is. In fact, they can mix with the people of God by going in and out of the temple. In the end, they die. They're forgotten about, and their wicked deeds are forgotten along with them. So I think the point here is simply that you can be a wicked person and not be known to the people that you're mixing among. Further, we have this problem of delayed justice in verse 11. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed quickly, therefore the hearts of the sons of men among them are given fully to do evil. We talk about this in our society about getting swift justice or proper justice. You know, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in our court system. It doesn't happen in life. The wicked get away with things. They get away with them for a long time. And because that's true, because God doesn't immediately bring judgment when somebody does something wrong, men's hearts are given to do wrong more. Think about the way that would be in reverse if when you did something evil, you were maybe struck down, killed. Well, from one point, that makes sense for us, right? I mean, if that was true, there'd be a lot less evil in the world, there'd be a lot less evil men, because they would be eliminated. But in God's wisdom, he doesn't operate that way. He's merciful, he's long-suffering, he's not willing in one case for the wicked to perish, but wants all men to come to repentance. And so for right now, The reality is that the world abounds in wickedness, but just for right now. God will ultimately judge. Let's look at the dynamics of God's retribution principle, verses 12 through 15. Although a sinner does evil 100 times and may lengthen his life, still I know that it will be well for those who fear God, who fear him openly. It will not be well for the evil man. He will not lengthen his days like a shadow because he does not fear God. Now, again, talked about this at the very beginning. We talked about it several times along the way. This is a central message of the book. It's to fear God and keep his commandments. Like the joy refrain, this appears several times in the book. Chapter 3, verse 14, I know that everything God does will remain forever. There's nothing to add to it, nothing to take from it. For God has so worked that men should fear him. Ecclesiastes 5:7, for in many dreams and in many words there's emptiness. And remember, what we were talking about there is that we can say, well, this is what I want to do, this is the way I think things should be. Not necessarily going to happen that way. We don't have that kind of power and authority. Instead, we should fear God. We should fear the one that we know does have that kind of authority and power. And then at the very end of the book, we'll look at this in more detail when we get there. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments. Because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment. Everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. Fearing God, then, is the ultimate answer that Solomon is leading us to answer this question for what profit is there for a man and all his activity under the sun. And as Ryken says, Solomon believes that he believes what he cannot see, that one day all will be well for everyone who lives in the fear of God. Solomon has one more thing to say along this line in verse 14. There's futility, and in this case I think the best way to translate the word is irony. There's irony which is done on the earth, that is, there are righteous men to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked. On the other hand, there are evil men to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I say that this too is irony. Now we've seen this before in Ecclesiastes. We've seen it also in Psalm 73, which we read, I think it was last Sunday. God doesn't always judge wicked men in this life the way we think he should. He doesn't always grant the righteous reward in this life that we think that they're due. That's kind of the way the retribution principle works in general, but God doesn't always work that way. He may not judge as quickly as we would like him to, but he will judge in the end. Well, it's time for another joy refrain. Solomon gives us one. He says in verse 15, so I commend pleasure. And the word here for commended is the same one we saw back in chapter 4, verse 2, where Solomon talks about congratulating the dead. The idea here is probably a little different from the way that we understand commended. It's the idea of considering fortunate. I consider fortunate pleasure or enjoyment. Why? Because such enjoyment mitigates the difficulties of the things that he's just been describing. So he looks at these things in different sections of the book, and he looks at them very critically, very closely, and he recognizes that there's irony, there's futility in them, but then he comes back to remind us that you can still have joy despite these things. There's nothing good for man under the sun except to eat, to drink, to be merry. This will stand by him in his toils throughout the days of his life which God has given him under the sun. At the same time, we have to recognize that we won't always find answers to all of our questions. Solomon says, when I gave my heart to know wisdom and to see the task which has been done on the earth, even though one should never sleep day or night. And that speaks again to just how rigorously he has done the investigation. He sought it out to the nth degree. I saw every word of God. I concluded that man cannot discover the work which has been done on the sun. Even though man should seek laboriously, he will not discover. And though the wise man should say, I know he cannot discover. Despite all the advantages that wisdom provides, even somebody as wise as Solomon could not get answers to every one of his questions. And yet, man can still enjoy life when he fears God, when he keeps his commandments, when he sees every good gift that's from his hand. And I think the key truth in all this is something that will help us get the proper perspective is to recognize that God is great and we are not. He's so much greater than we are. And we have a tendency to measure not only each other, but also God by our standards. He's made the world and all that's in it. He has the right to rule over it and to do whatever he wants to with his creation. He needs no counsel from anyone, and he will never be overruled. Now, this is exactly the point that God made to Job at the end of his ordeal. You remember that after all that Job went through, after all the counselors that had sat with him and tried to convince him that he was experiencing what he was experiencing because of some sin that he committed, and after all of Job's counter-arguments and of actually seeking a day in court with God, God speaks to him. He speaks to him at the end on two different occasions. Job 38 says, the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now gird up your loins like a man, and I'll ask you, you instruct me. A lot of sarcasm in that. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. And then the Lord goes on to describe the great things that he's made and all that he does to sustain the universe. He speaks about the sun, the sea, the stars, the rain, the vegetation, the great variety of animal life. And his point in all this is that he's the one that did all this. It all belongs to him. Who are you, Job, to question the way that I administrate my universe? And Job comes to understand that. He says in chapter 40, verse 3, Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am insignificant. What can I reply to thee? I lay my hand on my mouth. Once I've spoken, and I will not answer. Even twice, and I will add no more. But God goes on. He reminds him again. Chapter 40, verse 7. Gird up your loins like a man. I'll ask you, and you instruct me. Will you really annul my judgment? Will you condemn me, that you may be justified? Or do you have an arm like God? Can you thunder with a voice like his? Adorn yourself with eminence and dignity. Clothe yourself with honor and majesty. Pour out the overflowings of your anger. There's a sense in which Job had done that through the course of the book. And look on everyone who is proud and make him low. Look on everyone who is proud and humble him and tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them in the dust together. Bind them in the hidden place. Then I will also confess to you that your own right hand can save you. And in this case, the Lord goes on to describe two more great creatures that he has made. Behemoth, which is a land creature, which we believe is a dinosaur, and Leviathan, great monster of the sea. God's point again here is, can you do anything like this? Who then are you to question me in the way that I administrate my universe? And Job replies this time in chapter 42. I know that thou canst do all things, and that no purpose of thine can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Remember, he's quoting God at this point. Therefore I have declared that which I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear now, and I will speak. I will ask thee, and do thou instruct me. Again, he's quoting God there. I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees thee. Therefore I retract and I repent in dust and ashes. Job had gone through all that he went through, and he came to know God better as a result. He came to recognize the greatness and power of God in a way that he didn't before. And maybe do the same thing as we walk in life under the sun, fearing God, keeping his commandments until that day that he takes away the curse and makes all things new. Let's pray together. Father, we come to know you through a supernatural new birth. You turn the lights on for us. You grant us understanding so that we recognize that we are sinners, that we need salvation, and that that's been provided for us through your own Son, through Jesus Christ. And we're changed. The enmity between us and you is removed, and we become one of your children. And yet, to understand the tremendous difference between who you are and who we are, it takes time. It's a process by which we learn from your word. You take us through difficulties, and we come to recognize that even through those difficulties, we come to know you better. We're sanctified in the truth. We come to depend upon your word. Even when we walk through something that we don't completely understand, you don't change. Your promises don't change. And we come to recognize that we can trust you and depend upon you even when we don't understand. I just pray that that would be something that, as we look at it this morning, you would sink deep into our hearts, and that we would always trust you, no matter what we walk through. And that we would hold on to this central message in the book of Ecclesiastes, is to fear you, to keep your commandments, to look forward to the return of Christ and his making all things right in the end. That's something else that you teach us from the scriptures, and something that we hold on to as we walk our lives in wisdom, seeking to please you in all things. Thank you for the truth of your word. Thank you for the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. Thank you for the totality of your word that tells us not only how the world came to be, but how it will be in the end. And thank you for your Son, the sacrifice he's made to provide for this redemption. We pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.